What people don't realise about government or parliament, that was created out of the birth of treason. We would not have a government and we would not have a parliament if treason hadn't occurred.
All right, so we made it, guys. Thank you so much for being here. Do you want to introduce yourself?
So yeah, I'm Chris Reed. I'm Jim.
I'm Aaron Indigo.
I'm Magnus.
So yeah, it's been a long time coming. We've been talking about this for over a year, sitting down and having this conversation. We're all in our kind of like late 20s, and we was like, we really need to represent this conversation for our generation and to make it bite-sized for our people, because it's complicated what we're going to talk about today, which is the Magna Carta, Article 61, what's going on right now, treason, the Great Awakening, everything that's kind of happening in the UK and across the globe. We're going through such a big transformation that we've felt during everything that we've gone through. The most important thing is to apply knowledge instead of just going out there and screaming and being uneducated. And we've realized the power. We've already seen the power of when people have used this knowledge. And so, yeah, man, I've invited you here to my house, Southwest London. It's the day after Lionsgate. It's the 9th of August, 2021.
The Lions are here.
The Lions are here, man. Yeah, and we just, yeah, man, let's start that conversation. So,
how do we want to start then? So I think the most important thing to kind of get people to realise is that although we may have a picture of how things are, it's all really just been a case of usurpation and just treason inspired BS to excuse my French, but yeah, people need to see that. I hear a lot of people talking about common law and stuff, and people need to understand and overstand that we've never had common law. So we've never really had true common law as it was meant to happen, and that's purely because it comes. So common law is kind of 13th century, so that's when it kind of came in and started being formed into case law and this type of stuff. But that was 100 years after the Magna Carta was created. And the Magna Carta was created to take the power away from the king's courts, to take the power away from the papacy, foreign intervention and foreign rule. So in the core principle of the Magna Carta being created, it was to remove that power from those courts, from the king courts, from the papacy. And then the creation of common law is kind of given it back to the king's courts and the papacy, which obviously we can't have, because nobody is higher than the law. Everybody should be under the same rule of law. And we should, with things like the Magna Carta, so the Magna Carta really, in their eyes, only lasted kind of 2 or 3 months. So we had the need for the creation of it, the papacy sealing this papal bull, which was a Treaty of Verona 1213, which was all of our rights, all of our souls, all of our land, everything we own given over to the Vatican. And when the barons started finding out about this and telling all of the people communally got together and decided that no, we're not having that. Like we're English, we're sovereign, we're sovereign kings and queens, and that's how it is. We're not listening to any foreign rule. So they got together, they went down to Runnymede, and they essentially got a peace treaty that had not only true sovereignty for the people within it, but also created, or took the power away from the king and the queen as they wanted. Because what happened was previously people were going up to the king's courts and the king was being judge, jury and executioner, which isn't law and isn't fair and doesn't provide a rule of law whatsoever. So yeah, to stop that, the Magna Carta is created. And then what happens is a few months later, King John dies of dysentery, so he's out of the picture. His 9-year-old son, King Henry, takes over, and this 9-year-old is now changing treaties with the Pope whispering in his ear. All of the things that the very same Magna Carta 1215 prevents and prohibits from doing. So now we've got a 9-year-old king changing treaties with the Pope. Well, actually, officially, it was the Pope that annulled it. So all you need to do, and all people need to really do with this, is read the original Magna Carta 1215 once, the translated version, and you'll see everything that they've done, they haven't been allowed to do.
Yeah.
So although, and this is what people need to kind of see these days, is although that, yes, the courts, they have buildings, the police, their enforcement, these things look and feel and smell real, but the reality is that it's all here through treason, and it's all illegitimate. And I like to think that once people realise this system of slavery that we're all in, once people actually really see that we're all in this together, we'll all want to leave it together. And we won't be using notices anymore, because we won't be having to individually fight this beast anymore, because that's how this beast has its success. We're all individually spread out, and when this system attacks us, it attacks us as their whole. They're fully resource beast, and it comes at us as an individual, and it gets a lot of success.
That's so there's a lot there. You know, there's Runnymede, there's the 13th century, there's beasts. So let's take it back and just make it a little bit more digestible. You know, I want someone like my mother to be able to understand this, because we've been denied this information.
Let's go back to Rome. So
let's go back to Rome.
Most people know, and they know the Roman Empire as being this powerful machine with loads of buildings, loads of colosseums. Like, that's where the power's kind of been. If you think of movies like Gladiator and stuff, that's like, people will. And if you look at the stories of like the Bible and other religious texts and stuff, people are familiar with Rome. And what happened with Rome? Rome never fell. Rome just morphed into the papacy. And when
what's
I say
the papacy?
So the papacy is the popes. So you talk about the Vatican, the things connected to the Vatican and the bloodlines and the papal bloodlines. So the Pope said that is what we refer to when we say the papacy. So everything Vatican. So what happened when Rome fell was the papacy. So the Vatican was going around to other countries, and they were essentially going to the monarchies or the kings and queens, and they were saying that we're gonna give you the Catholic Church, you're going to accept a load of money and jewels, and you're going to be under us via this treaty that we're going to get you to sign. And that's how things are going to go. You're going to receive a lot of money, you're going to have everything that you've ever wanted, like you've always wanted, but yeah, we call the shots here. Mm-hmm. And if a king or queen rejected that, it would be the Vatican attacking them until they submitted, and if they accepted, it would be life under the Catholic Church. But throughout this, the people still suffered majorly, because before the papacy had got involved, they still had these tyrannical monarchs who were raping, pillaging, and just overtaxing their people to fund their foreign wars. And when the papacy came in and took charge of it, things only got worse and tenfold. So we're then dealing with a whole country of people that are hungry, haven't eaten, being whisked off the courts and being executed and hung for things that they're not guilty of. And it's just a whole shit show, so excuse the French. But when the barons started finding out about this Treaty of Verona, which is the papacy's agreement with the monarch of England, so actually what I'll explain about is what really happened with King John. So King John fell out with Rome, and as a result, what they did was they put a guy called Stephen Langton as the kind of the head. He wasn't classed as the king. I think he was classed as like the archbishop, but in Rome's eyes, he was the man, and King John recognized this. So even though King John was still king, this guy Stephen Langton was going around and running the show for the Vatican. And what King John did was he went back groveling to Rome and said, "Look, I apologize. I messed up. Tell me what I need to do to get the power back, and for me to be recognized as the authority again." And that's when they made him sign the Treaty of Verona 1213. So now he's signed this treaty with all of our rights, all of our land and stuff, all over back to Pope Innocent III, and he now owns us. And now the barons have, in between this time, started finding out. They've heard rumours that this is what King John has done. They start to see the legitimacy.
Just explain quickly who the barons are, like,
so
for people who wouldn't know.
So the barons, they are the true kind of authority of the Commonwealth and of the kingdom. So back in the times that we're talking about, if we're talking about a community that's living together, if somebody was going into the village and killing the chickens and you know who it was, you'd report it to your baron. The baron would solve things, and it would be in the baron's best interest to solve things, because if he didn't, you'd all come together and you'd replace him in the nicest words possible. So the barons, it was in their best interest to keep things peaceful, to literally keep the peace, because if they didn't, it turned on them.
And do we have barons now?
Yeah, we still. So nothing has changed in terms of their roles or their power. It's just been illegitimately and treasonously watered down. So just like with I'll continue talking about Rome and the papacy first, so try not to get lost. But so with the papacy making us sign, or making King John sign the Treaty of Verona 1213, that's all of our rights gone off to them. The barons then come together, start telling people of what's happened. People start rising together, and that's when we all go down to Runnymede together. And this is what people need to realize, that it wasn't just a barons thing. Like if 25 barons go down to Runnymede and take on the king plus the Vatican, they'd have been chopped up, and a piece would have been sent to every country that was potentially planning on invading England as a deterrent. Like, you don't get a peace treaty from those organizations and places like the Vatican unless there's true communal support and force and power behind it, like there would have been. So we've then got everybody communally agreeing that things are messed up and things need changing, everybody going down and getting this peace treaty, people thinking that, okay, we've got this now, things are going to be good. And then obviously a few months later, when King John dies, King Henry takes over, and that's when things really started illegitimately and treasonously going wrong, because Magna Carta 1215, that was the baby, that was the one, that was our people's trust, that had security clauses for anti-treason and for tyranny and for all the things that have opened the gates to things happening to us now. Like, this document, this treaty, this peace treaty, had those protections in place, and it still does. That's why it's so important.
There's a lot of people that say it doesn't have that power anymore. What do you say to that? Because, you know, we've been going around educating people and trying to, get them to sign their oath to one of the barons. And there's a lot of people that say, like, it's dead and it doesn't exist and there's no power. Like, what would you have to say to that?
That's why I get everybody to just read the original translated version, because just like by reading that, it will show you that it's not just for the barons, because it's got words like that. I've done a video where it explains that we're talking about a treaty that in those times things were a little bit sexist, so that's why in the actual clause 61 translation it refers to like free men and free man and people like that. And although it says words like the commune as well, which is it's not gender specific for that, so it's got words like that. But again, the document is from a time where men unfortunately had a lot more power than women, so that's why it's referred to in that. But yeah, just like by reading the document, you'll see that it's not just for the barons. You'll see words like in perpetuity or perpetual, which means to last forever, and especially things like clause 61 towards like the bottom, or not, maybe not clause 61, maybe like clause 63 and other clauses like that. It will say near the bottom, and any change or any part of this treaty that gets altered, like, consider it void and invalid forever. Like, it's literally a crime to change this document. It's treason to change this document.
So let's just slow down a bit. So why do we need this? Why is it relevant right now? There's a lot of people that think life is okay and like we're just like things are about to be normal. Like why do we need this right now? Do you understand though? Like, there's a lot of people that are thinking.
What's the necessity of Article 61, like that specific clause? Why we're using that clause right now?
So obviously the invocation of the recent invocation of this goes back to 23rd of March 2001. But the events leading up to that, like if we're talking about the position that we're in now, like it's not just from the past like 20 or 30 years or 40 or 50. Like, this is millennium long treason that has just really been accelerated by the mechanisms that was put in place starting in like the 70s. And if we're talking about like the invocation of clause 61, that was really an open declaration to all of us that a lot of people have grown, like especially me myself, where the island that I grew up in, we grew up in like the law is the law, there is no alternative, and black and white is how it is. There's nothing out of that. Like, if you don't like the decision that's made from that authority, then you best get a picket and you best go out protesting and hope somebody listens to you. There's nothing that you can do outside of the system, because the system is benevolent, all-knowing, all-loving, all-caring, all-powerful, and indestructible. So when that declaration was made that, look, you guys have got a clean, treason has been declared, you guys have got a clean slate now to all of the bad things, all like, if we're talking about current times, look at the legislation that they're putting through. Like, it's scary just reading a couple of lines of that. Yeah. That's why it's important today. But going back to them, like, that was the declaration of saying, look, everything is a mess. We've done the best that we can do by giving you a tool that comes from, it's a dusty document that's been used previous times before with ultimate success, that has resulted in the changeovers of monarchies. But we're giving you this tool to get with the people, get with the commune, and to change things if you want to, if you really want to.
All right, guys, so let's take it back a bit, because I'm feeling a little confused and overwhelmed. Like, I think everyone is right now in this moment. There's so much information, it's like an information war out there. Maybe I can just take it back on our journey. So, we saw 2020 come in March, the whole world kind of dramatically changed. And we saw kind of draconian measures being applied from all governments across the world. Now, whatever your views on it are, they've been very strict. They've been kind of unprecedented. And it led to us, learning a lot about, kind of even before the Magna Carta, I was aware about the straw man, the idea that when you're born, right, your name is written in capital letters, often in blue or black ink, and it's the way that the system work with us as a corporation or a business. So I'm like Mr. Aaron Miller, and they speak to me through contracts. Like when the police speaks to you, we're uneducated, and when they say, do you understand, it means if I say yes, I'm actually saying I stand under you. And I started to realize that there's they're making money on our birth certificate and stuff like this. And I want people to educate yourself on that. The Nature of the Cage, Straw Man on YouTube is like that's where me and Chris kind of started bonding on that kind of stuff when we first became friends. So maybe we could talk about now what we've been doing, educating people on the Magna Carta and the oaths that we've been talking about and the 25 barons. So we was talking about earlier, going back about 800 years, there were 25 barons that were always there to protect, I guess, us as the people of the land.
Trusted by the people to protect the people. And like as we were kind of explaining before, it was in the best interest of the barons to keep peace, because if they didn't, we'd know what peace did look like, and we'd take it into our own hands, just as the law should always tell us to. Like, we should always be living in an honour-based society where we've got provisions in place and protections in place for treason, tyranny, all of the things that are happening to us now. Because if we're all communally aware that we've got those provisions in place, it doesn't take 20 plus years after an invocation of a clause for us to start thinking and talking about stopping all of this. If everybody's aware and everybody's educated, then as soon as something gets invocated, then we can start, everybody knows what to do, and we can start actually changing it.
Could one of you guys give me an example of why you feel it's necessary to have this education right now? Because a lot of people in our generation, they have no reason to even want to educate themselves on this, or even care, or think it's necessary.
Yeah, I feel like it's one of them scenarios and situations where I feel like until people are like in a predicament where they have to apply it, they don't. And because there's such a blanket over what's happening, people aren't even aware of what's happening. So there's no need for them to be looking at the Magna Carta and activating it. But for someone who is going down that journey and came in like me and Aaron, and we're looking at common law, and now it's kind of led us to the depths of where even common law came from, the baseline of it all, Magna Carta, and then learning about the specific Article 61, and then reading about, like Magnus says, how it was used back in the day to protect the people. So obviously now, when there's so much going on in the world, and there is a regime, whatever your views are, there is a regime out here to control us and bring harm to us. And that's why, for the people who have done the research, they're like, I'm going to go to Article 61 because that's the treason clause, and that's what's always there to activate and protect us. So I just feel like it's the time now to draw upon that. What would you say, Jim? Like, what would you say we need it for right now?
Yeah, so like you say, it's the treason clause, and just a quick definition of treason is acts by people in power or whoever to betray their own country, their own people. And if we just look at what's happening right now and some of the legislation that's being passed, like the Coronavirus Act, there's another one called the Coronavirus Bill, I believe it's 122, that is in its final stages about being passed through right now, and it's giving the illusion of the powers to people in certain positions to forcibly detain people for any prolonged period of time that they see necessary. Now that's subjective and it goes off the person's own moral compass. And the way that everything's being pushed at the moment in the media, people's moral compass is all automatically like switched on people to think that we're doing harm by not getting experimental things pushed into our veins, and we're doing harm by not wearing masks when we're out in public, even though the science doesn't support either of those two things.
Well, this is what I really wanted to get into, because you just said it there. Our government are starting to get into a position where they have power to kind of detain children, and it goes back to what we were talking about the birth certificate, because they own 1/10 of us. Yeah. So this is a lot about we don't realize the power that we've given away and that our government have given away.
The government, people don't know. People look at the government as this benevolent source of power and this source of unquestionable power. And what people don't realize about government or parliament, That was created out of the birth of treason. We would not have a government and we would not have a parliament if treason hadn't occurred.
How did that occur, and when did it occur? Do you know?
So, if we go back again to the period of time before Magna Carta 1215 came about, and we're talking about a country that is in the midst of people, so the papacy are trying to take control of this country. They're trying to convert the monarch to do as they say. So all the while this is going on, the people of this country and kingdom are suffering. They're getting starved. They're getting thrown into the king's courts, where King John is being judge, jury, and executioner for literally anybody at any time of day. And the country and the kingdom is in an absolute mess. So with the Treaty of Verona, the Treaty of Verona is a papal bull, and I really advise, well, you probably have to go on DuckDuckGo for this, but research what papal bulls are. So PAPALBULLS, and you'll see that papal bulls are actually the treaties that the Vatican uses to seal with monarchies of different countries. But when treaties like the Treaty of Verona, for instance, that includes all of our land, all of our souls, all of our life, all of the life on this land. And when these evil entities make these agreements that include life, they have to take life to seal it. So papal bulls are actually sacrifices made that just kind of cement their evil manifestation. So,
and when you say sacrifice, what specifically do you mean?
The sacrifice of children, so the sacrificial element of children, because they are pure and innocent and
closest to that God source,
yeah,
in human form, right?
Yeah, and that's what makes these papal bulls and treaties have the significance that these evil entities hold that they have.
So this Treaties of Verona was what the popes, they were trying to like to take over the world, I guess, or trying to like, they're trying to get every single country to agree to this term. So this is the Treaties of Verona.
So the Treaty of Verona, that was just for us. But what you're right, what the papacy is doing. So the papacy is Rome and the popes, and what they were doing for over time is they were going to every country that had a kind of significant monarchy or power structure, and they were going, okay, we want that, we want to usurp that, we want to put the Catholic Church down as that. So for us, they had the Treaty of Verona. For, say, for instance, the Spanish Inquisitions and stuff, they had a different papal bull for that. And it was just any time that they wanted to do some evil manifestation, they'd create a papal bull that told them that they were allowed to do just that.
Kind of similar to what they're doing now with the Act, statutes and legislations, is they're just making their own rules kind of thing.
Yeah, and that is to do with, if like Clause 61 and the Magna Carta plays a significant role in that. So what has happened over time is they've tried to, obviously, like I said, Parliament and government wouldn't have been created if treason hadn't occurred. And then over time, what has happened is they've tried to water down and eradicate the roles more and more and more and more and more. And then essentially what's happened is we've got to the stage where we've got like the treaties of Nice, the treaties of Lisbon and stuff, which have really kind of solidified handing over the rights and powers of us, but openly as well. Like, we've got to think the treaties of Verona 1213, that was all, we weren't aware of that. That was a secret agreement between the monarchy and the popes, whereas these ones have been through botched referendums in front of our faces, and it's made us almost think that we're doing that when we're not. Like, our rights and our laws have been handed over to the EU and places like the UN, and then what's happened is re-Brexit, they've put up a show of saying, oh yeah, we're splitting away from that. But your question was, how are the Parliament creating laws like confetti, this, that and the other? Brexit has allowed them to do that, because with them exiting that, they've now parading themselves off as them being sovereign, and a parliament or government can never be sovereign. We're sovereign. They're a dead corporation and an entity that is now parading and charading around as being sovereign, and as a result of it parading and everybody thinking they're sovereign, because let's not forget, like, everything that they do requires our consent. So if we've got a community and everybody on the outside that thinks that this power center is legitimate, then this power center that people think is legitimate, that is also parading, charading as being sovereign, is then almost encouraged to put out this legislation and that, because it's created an illusion that everybody else is believing in. So it really is just trickery, high level trickery.
A lot of trickery, and it seems just like what you're saying is that the governments and the people that are in power and that are supposed to be our sovereign and parents in a sense and look after us as a nation are very untrustworthy, and they don't know their true role. But let me just take it back quickly. So you were talking about the treaties of Verona, and these popes came into our country and they tried to control King John. Yeah. And just because there were some big things mentioned there, we was talking about like child sacrifice, so you're saying that with that, they also, in order to like seal that treaties, there would have also been some kind of child sacrifice.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's quite big, obviously quite big news for people already, because these are the popes and the Catholics at that time that came over. And so then the Magna Carta was introduced to stop this from happening and to make sure that the people of the UK were just like protected.
Yeah. So imagine people are starting in the Commonwealth now, or just over in the kingdom to say correctly. So they're starting. The barons are going around. And they've realised that King John has signed this Treaty of Verona with Pope Innocent III, and then what are they doing? They're going around telling the people, "Oh, do you know what the king's done to us? He's committed treason. Do you know what the king's done to us? Committed treason." And they go around and they tell people, and then people go down towards King John. Everybody goes there together, and they say, "Look, peace treaty time. It is time for a peace treaty. You can't do that anymore. You have signed an agreement without our consent. Signed this treaty that have taken all of our rights, all of our land, everything. You've raped us essentially. So what we're doing is we're making you. Well, not making. Again, you can't be forced to sign a peace treaty. It's peace. So we're giving you a peace treaty. We're not executing you like we should have done, but." Here's the peace treaty. Seal it, agree to it, and this is how we're doing, because you've got to your position from having the control in your courts, from having the power being you being above the law, and we need to change that. We need to flip that. Nobody is above the law anymore. We are going to be going by a collectively agreed and consented to set of rules and laws or clauses and articles, and we're going to have these provisions in place for if things become treasonous or tyrannical.
So that was the original creation of the Magna Carta in 1215, and any old Google search will reveal to you that the Magna Carta was changed and Article 61 got taken out of it. Now, as we know, that's a treasonous act in itself, but can you go more into that on how that's treasonous and how that actually came about?
Yeah, so like we kind of said at the start, the first thing that people need to do is they need to read that translated version of the text so they can see that what these words. If they don't know what these words mean, just get a trustworthy dictionary and have a look at what that words like perpetual or perpetuity means, forever and forever lasting, and especially with, like, for instance, anybody that says, "Oh yeah, did you hear they redrafted that?" Like the best one for me that I've had, and it's the easiest rebuttal on the earth, is when people say, "Oh, do you know there's only 4 clauses that are still active?" And I go, "Great, now we're having a conversation, because 4 clauses what they active from," and people kind of look at you with a question mark. What do you mean what they active from? Well, 4 clauses are still active. They've got to be active from something. Where is it? Maybe the original treaty then. Okay, well, let's go back to the original treaty and let's have a look what else is on it. That's when you realise that there's more than 4. There's actually 60 or 63, and everything that they're kind of telling you that isn't is actually is in this document, and everything that they've done is actually strictly prohibited, and in words like so I think it's clause 63, or one of the clauses similar to that is like literally if you try to change this, it's void and forever invalid, and it's literally a crime to do that. So when you've got that reiterated in multiple clauses and stuff, you come up with the picture of this treaty cannot be changed. It is literally we've nearly gone through civil wars to get this peace treaty. We've gone through so much.
So what happened in like 1215 for it to be so secure up until now? Like, why is it still so secure now?
So in terms of it being so secure, because it the Magna Carta like created the foundations that a lot of countries use for their legal framework, because of the main principle of justice should be in front of your peers. It shouldn't be you shouldn't be at the mercy of a house of cards. Obviously, wow. Obviously that's not how we've got things now, because we're all living in this system, this matrix that is fully enforcing acts and statutes, even though it has no authority to do so. And this is what makes it a little bit difficult for people to realize that what we're doing is authentic, because we're saying to people how things should be, whilst these buildings are still got people going in them, they're still staffed, the police are still wearing their Freemasonry attire and stuff, and it's
And
just
injustice
accepted.
is getting served every single day, and people are going to prison because of acts and statutes. So they're seeing physical proof that the system's working. So then they're looking at common law and they're looking at Magna Carta and they're like, yeah, but what's it done? What's it achieved? And in my opinion, that's the wrong way to look at it, because it's the potential that people should be looking at rather than the current outcomes.
People need to see like the system that we tried to create, and like, again, I say we tried to create, it's still there. Like everything that we've got is still legitimate and it's still been done. Just because they've typed over it doesn't make what we've got any less valid than the day that it was created. Like it's still there, but in terms of getting people to see that, they just really need to inner over and understand why that treaty was created in the first place. And if you can do that, and you know why it was created, then everything that they do afterwards, the first thing you get that comes in your head is, well, how could they do that if it says that they weren't allowed to do that? And you then start like self-answering the questions that, unfortunately, a fact checker or a Google will just tell you, no, it is null and void.
And if we go back to when it was changed, just the conversation that we had earlier off camera, you mentioned that it was changed by King
Henry. So
King Henry was how old?
He was 9 years old.
So we're trusting King Henry, who's 9 years old, to change one of the most influential and important peace treaties that's ever been instated. Can everyone just cast their mind back to 9 years old? It was Skittles, 7 p.m. bedtime, and literally the tweenies. Do you know what I mean? Like,
and that's where they messed up as well. If they'd have actually been on the money back then, they would have got King Henry so it wasn't King Henry that annulled it; it was the Pope that annulled it. But if they'd have been a bit more switched on back then, they would have actually got this 9-year-old to annul it, because he would have had more authority than giving. So essentially, the Pope has annulled a document that it literally forbids him from annulling. So that's what's happened.
Guys, but why should we care? You know, most people our age, you know, smoking weed, having sex, they're on Tinder. You know, they think that life's going to be good. We can go to festivals now. What is it that maybe makes you kind of anxious about? Are you anxious about the future? Because, you know, we all have a sense of mission here. We've all been on the streets.
I guess that's what the anxiety and the fear, as we've transformed into
mission,
a solution and mission. Yeah, and this is why we've come across these things.
But Chris, what are you anxious about in the future? Like, why, like this tyrannical system, this government, it seems to be going down a direction, and obviously we're trying to stop that by empowering everyone and educating everyone. But maybe share what you feel what lane they're trying to take us down.
I think when people like look back at history and they look at slavery, etc., and they think that we've transformed past that part just because we're in a modernized world. That's where people have got it lost and twisted. And this type of slavery and agenda now, it's so hidden.
Psychological and spiritual.
And slavery was once legal, you know.
Yeah, there you go. Do you know what I mean? So at this point now, it takes a lot of discernment and intuitive guidance to really see and feel what's going on. And like I said before, people aren't seeing what's going on, so they're so far from the solution because they haven't even met the problem yet.
They're not recognizing their slavery.
Yeah.
The problem that a lot of people have is, like, if somebody takes 80% of your salary, like, do you class that as slavery? Well, we know that 100% of somebody's salary, so they're not getting nothing. We know that that's slavery. But if you're taking 80%, which I think on average, every man and woman, if you're talking about all the different types of tax and insurance and stuff that they pay, they're giving close to 80% of their life.
Yeah, because there's no actual law to back income tax, is there?
No, they're none. It's all in. I think there was a famous guy who walked into the Scotland income tax department, and they've got a massive textbook for tax that's like that big, and he's like, "Can you find me the part that says I have to pay it?" And this guy was so confident that he'd be able to find this little section. He's just scrolling through each page after page after page and just unable to find it. And just, that's to send the guy packing. But
so I'm hearing a lot online about this. Is it an invocation?
Yeah. So if we could just spend a little bit of time talking about how the invocation came about, and if you could just also read to us what the actual barons actually sent to the Queen and her reply, that would be really great for people listening, just to add to its validity. And if you could also just hone in on what the barons do and how powerful they are and why they would have invoked this and how it came about.
So we'll start off back with the invocation. So clause 61 is the anti-treason and anti-tyranny clause. So when the barons who are responsible for assessing when treason and tyranny is in the air, they're the ones that have the protocol and the provision in place. If you look and you read the Magna Carta, there is a protocol in place for invocating Clause 61. And the actual process is, or protocol is, when there's a problem, four of the barons, so there's 25 barons, there's actually more than that, but in this Magna Carta there's 25 barons, but all that needs to happen is 4 of them come together, raise an issue to the Queen. The Queen then has 40 days to respond to that issue and to rectify things. If she doesn't, then those 4 barons can get with everybody else and essentially invocate the anti-treason clause.
And that means redress, right? Can you just mention what redress is? Redress
is, there's probably a few words that you could use to describe what needs to happen afterwards, but we'll use redress. So redress would be, with the invocation, our last most recent invocation is 23rd of March 2001. So we have now had the opportunity and a clean slate in front of us to all come together to null and void this evil, this corporation that should never have been in there in the first place. Like, we've had 20 open years to all get together and say, look, yeah, did you realize treason has been declared? Have you gone through the evidence? Oh, actually, all of this happened previously as well. Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, yeah, they are pretty evil. Like, we've had the opportunity to all come together and agree evil has happened, and to all look at the invocation as our opportunity to change that. And it's not like Clause 61 really is a set of instructions. It is as simple as that. The clause itself is the anti-treason clause, but reading it out word for word, that is the set of instructions. That is essentially telling and instructing and demanding everybody to take an oath when treason has been declared. So, like, imagine a foghorn or a big siren has just blasted out like treason, and like everybody in the community knows that treason has been declared. So it's almost like taking your anti-treason songbook out, looking at Clause 61 and reading it as a set of instructions. As simple as that.
In 2001, March 23rd, this is the last time it happened, and this is when it was invocated by the barons.
Yeah. So read the whole. If we we could go back so much further, but if we just keep things in a recent kind of time scale of things, so. If we go back to the 70s, that was when in Heath's era, and if anybody's researched Ted Heath or Ed Heath, you'll see that he is a disgusting individual that was tied to a lot of paedophilia and a lot of heavy paedophilia at that as well. And just like the papers were, this is the thing, this isn't my opinions, this is the papers and newspaper and all of the media outlets' opinions. And they were using words to describe him as Europhiles and stuff like that, because he was trying to take us into Europe, but he was also a paedophile. So it's a nice combination of words there. So if we go back to Heath's administration and era, I'm pretty sure blackmail would have played a part in this, but he's then taken us, he's gone behind to his other MPs and stuff and literally said, oh yeah, I think taking us into Europe would be a good idea. Let's start getting people to do that. And he's told people from his own like political party have questioned him and asked, oh, is that not treason? We're allowed to do that? And he's gone, no, it's fine, everything's good, everything's by the book, you know how it is. And he's lulled people into taking people into Europe. And
you would say that going into Europe was a treasonous act, right?
Act of treason. That is.
Why would you say that?
Because it's taken we should not be giving away our rights or anything to another country. If you do that, you just open a door for all kinds of problems. Like, if every country should be, unless we're gonna have one big redress and all work out, like kind of like what they want to do with us now, but the nice way. They want to do a great reset with us the evil way. If we actually did that the nice way and had a set of law that's applicable to every kind of like every country with the same song sheet, utter harmony, like that would be nice. But what was I talking about before?
Article 61's invocation in.
From what I've researched, it's the Tony Blair situation and the.
So Tony Blair, that was the Treaty of Nice. That's the main event that triggered the invocation of Clause 61. So that was the direct. So when the Treaty of Nice started coming around on these barons' desks and they were being asked to kind of put their name, put their signature on it, that's when they started talking to their advisors, and their advisors would have been like, look, if you sign that, that's treason, and you could hang for that if people work it out.
And this was in the papers and everything, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, this was fully reported on. Like I said, I've got probably 62 or 63 gigabytes from relation to the invocation.
Magnus, you know.
It's
They say 62 gigabytes.
That's why they've never come round to my house. They know if they do that, they get a guy that's just going to be standing there in court. Like they'll do my court session in a bunker underneath They won't have in the open at all. They don't want me standing there with those files.
So after the Treaty of Nice got put on the desks of the barons and whatnot, they then invocated Article 61 as the remedy to this treasonous treaty, right? So could you just speak more about their actual petition and like what they actually did to remedy the treason?
So with that and the actual invocation of things, we got to imagine like these are hereditary peers that have had their roles and responsibilities that I don't think they've ever been told to them. Like the whole aim of the game since treason has really been kicked in was to take away these guys' responsibility, to take away our rights, and to make
because
it
of their power, right?
Because of their power, because of our power as well. Like people think it's not just like the barons represent us, just same as the sovereign represents us. They're not higher than us, and they never should be higher than us. Like they're on the same plateau of law that we are all on.
For the people at home who were just basically like, this is all brand new. In 2001, it was invocated by the Barons Committee, and they started a petition because of Tony Blair's Treaty of Nice. Is that right?
Yeah, guys. So when the Treaty of Nice landed on these guys' desks, like they do things years in advance. So the Treaty of Nice would have probably started appearing on their desks. I think the invocation happened in 2001. The Treaty of Nice probably appeared on their desk probably 96, 97, 98, time. And when these documents started appearing on their desks, that was when these barons started realizing that they're going to be asked to do something soon, and they're going to be asked to put their name on that. And
so does the treaty would have no power without the barons signing it, right?
Well, technically the way things work is they need the way that they're geared up now is royal assent. So with the Queen ratifying that and giving the assent to that was kind of classed as their illegitimately legitimate. But again, like we could have a whole talk show about the coronation oath and how that's been changed over years to, instead of it representing an oath to the people, with it being an oath to the papacy. So that kind of deep-rooted treason has been at play for a long time.
Can I just ask a simple question? Queen Elizabeth now, does she have any power now? Because I'm hearing a lot about like, you know, she's been taken away or something like that.
In terms of that, she's never really had any power, and that it's the same. It's the same for a lot of monarchs, unless.
But what I mean is like they've recognised that she's been quite treasonous, you know, and this is within like 2020. Have you guys seen this online? There's a lot saying like in Buckingham Palace, like the royal seals are different and they've changed them and stuff. I don't know if this is just hearsay, but
I think a lot of that probably will be hearsay. Maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, but
What happened to this whole situation with the Queen being dethroned after 2001? Because of Magna Carta.
That's how it works. So treason's been declared. Like there's no parliament, there's no government, there's no nothing. I know, and it's difficult to take that in when, like I said, these court buildings are staffed.
There's no government, there's no parliament. But we was just outside Parliament on Monday the 19th of
we were there
July.
With some beautiful buildings and Babylonian architecture, and yeah, they're all standing, and people were walking in those buildings the same way the police were getting paid, the same way the MPs were. The wheels kept turning.
So what are you suggesting here?
So just a quick one. We were just speaking about the invocation and the petition that the barons, you know, could we just read that out for the people? Could we hear exactly what the barons said to the Queen in black and white? This is people. This was the declaration of treason from the barons to the Queen. This is powerful stuff.
So I'll just play the communications between the Baron and the Private Secretary of the Office of Sovereign at the time. So the actual invocation, I think, is probably 30 or 40 pages long. So we won't read all of that, but I'll read this section here so people will get that. So Sir Robin Janvrin, KCVO CB, Principal Private Secretary to Her Majesty the Queen, Buckingham Palace, London, 23rd of March 2001. You were kind enough to invite a letter of amplification to accompany our petition to Her Majesty. Thank you. The Treaty of Nice raises issues of major constitutional importance. It directly threatens our rights and freedoms and undermines oaths of loyalty to the Crown. Such fundamental matters cannot be considered merely the stuff of day-to-day politics. They directly concern the Crown, the Constitution, and every British subject, including generations yet unborn. We find ourselves living in exceptional times, which call for exceptional measures. Hence our petition to Her Majesty, which exercises rights unused for over 300 years. Clause 61 of Magna Carta, which were reinforced by Article 5 of the Bill of Rights. As you know, the wording of Clause 61 says, and laying the transgression before us, petition to have that transgression redressed without delay. And we shall procure nothing from anyone, directly or indirectly, whereby any part of these concessions and liberties might be revoked or diminished. And if any such things have been procured, let it be void and null. So with that bit there, like we were talking about before, they can't change that. They cannot alter that. It is forbidden and prohibited multiple times within the original treaty, and that's what they're just reiterating there.
And that's clear evidential fact from 2001, right? No matter what Google says, no matter what the fact checker website says, these barons are very powerful people, and if they didn't have the power to do this, they wouldn't have been able to do it. And yeah, so following on from that, the Queen had 40 days to reply, right? And she replied on the
39th.
Yeah.
So
she was sat there sweating. Sweating those lizard sweat particles, man.
This pure adrenochrome coming. Wow. We'll carry on from here, but yeah. So we have petitioned Her Majesty to withhold the royal assent from any bill seeking to ratify the Treaty of Nice, because there is clear evidence, in brackets, which we shall address in a moment, that it is in direct conflict with the Constitution of the United Kingdom. It conflicts with the Magna Carta, with the Declaration of the Bill of Rights, and above all with Her Majesty's coronation oath and the oaths of office of Her Majesty's ministers. Every one of these protections stand to this day, which is why they are now being invoked by our petition.
Wow.
Ultimately, our supreme protection is Her Majesty's obligations under the coronation oath. The Queen has solemnly promised to govern the peoples of the United Kingdom according to the statutes in Parliament agreed on and according to their laws and customs. Her Majesty also swore to preserve all rights and privileges as by law do or shall appertain to any of them. From the spiritual point of view, it is unimaginable that Her Majesty would seek, in effect, a divorce from her duty. From a secular point of view, the coronation oath is a signed contract. Recent statements by ministers and by the previous Prime Minister confirm that they would not advise any measure which might tend to breach the coronation oath nor betray Her Majesty's promise to her loyal subjects. Her Majesty accepts the advice of her ministers. Conversely, it is their duty to advise in accordance with the coronation oath. They cannot lawfully advise a breach, nor can they gain or remain in power without swearing allegiance to the Crown. Yet the Treaty of Nice represents precisely such a breach, and it has now been signed by the Foreign Secretary using the royal prerogative. Blackstone's Commentaries, Volume 1, page 239, says the royal prerogative. The splendour, rights and powers of the Crown were attached to it for the benefit of the people. That's an important part. They form part of and are, generally speaking, as ancient as the law itself. De prerogativa regis is merely a declaratory of the common law. The duties arising from the relation of sovereign and subject are reciprocal. Protection, that is, the security and the governance of his dominions according to law, and the duty of the sovereign and allegiance and subjection with reference to the same criterion at the constitutional laws of the country, from, in return, the duty of the governed we have already observed in the law. It goes on for another couple of pages, but it's all really heavy stuff. But I'm just going to get to the response, which is the important part.
Yeah.
So before you do the response, so who was this that wrote this letter?
The barons.
So this was the barons, yeah. And where can people research this, or where did you get this?
So this is again so a little bit about myself. So when this started kicking off nearly 2 years ago now, the logical part in my brain when this was kicking off was we find an act. They're coming at us with these acts and statutes. We've got the Coronavirus Act, so therefore we need to find an act to.
Was any of these signed off by the Queen?
What is in the Coronavirus Act? Or she probably gave them royal assent gimmickly without authority, but to be honest, I don't know. I think now that Parliament are sovereign, they don't need the royal assent anymore. So. Or they don't think that they need the royal assent anymore.
So the treason runs even deeper.
Yeah, well, like I said, Parliament are literally out there pretending like the sovereign now, when we're the sovereigns.
But just to show, like, to validate this, because like you said, this is facts. Don't listen to Google. Where can people find this? Or
you can find you'd be able to do a freedom of information request if you really wanted to, and you'd be able to get the exact same petition that was handed to them, the same way that.
Okay.
You can these lords and barons, they don't reply too much, but if you ask them for a copy of the correspondence, they'd give you it.
So if you do your research, it's absolutely undeniable, and you'll find this.
Absolutely
This is what I want to clear up.
undeniable.